I've spoken about, just mentioned briefly, the question of Zionism. But what about Hollywoodism? Which is the other part of the title of today's discussion. Hollywood, in line with much of the established media, presents Zionism, and that much we are familiar with. Hollywood presents Zionism through rose-colored spectacles. Presents Zionism as being a movement of a brave, pioneering group. This is the general picture, producing a thriving state from scratch. That's the picture given. Achieving a superb feat. That's the general picture given in the world, in the media, and of course, through Hollywood. But it goes further. They present this image as being the image of which is accepted by all Jews and which is accepted by Judaism. So, what I'd like to do today is I'd like to explain to a degree the authentic Orthodox Jewish opposition to Zionism, in the hope that those responsible for producing cinema entertainment, will begin highlighting this alternative, this other view of Zionism, which is held by Orthodox Jews. And by so doing, hope to help to remove the stain, and it is a stain, which Zionism has imposed upon Judaism. In the eyes of the world, all Jews are Zionists. This is how most people assume that all Jews are Zionists. And in fact, when they hear that there's such a thing as Jewish people opposing Zionism, they consider this to be a paradox. How can Jews be Zionism? How can Jewish people oppose Zionism? But our message is, and that's the message I'd like to give over to you today, that indeed not all Jews are Zionists. In fact, much further than that, Zionism and Judaism are two differing and incompatible concepts. They're diametrically opposed to each other. Authentic Orthodox Jews sympathize completely with the Palestinian cause, and they protest vehemently the wrongs done to them by the Zionist regime. It is sadly a fact that nowadays among the Jewish people, this view is a minority view. But I'd like to say that although it's a minority view, first of all, the minority is a very powerful minority, comprising thousands, tens of thousands of, maybe more, maybe even hundreds of thousands of Jewish people. And it's, as I said, sadly a minority. But it's a significant minority. But I also want to say that this fact that it is a minority wasn't always the case. When Zionism first was founded, the vast majority of Jewish religious authorities and lay people rejected the whole concept of Zionism. And of course, as I said, very many still do. And this is really the genuine age-old Jewish view. And when sometimes people throw it into our faces and say, yeah, the fact that we are a minority, I say yes. But we have what I call the authority of history. Bearing in mind that Zionism is barely 100 years old, Judaism is thousands of years old. And if Zionism had had any connection, genuine connection with Judaism, it would have been with us a long time before. So we have the authority of history. But what is it that Judaism opposes in the concept of Zionism? The opposition to Zionism by Orthodox Judaism is based, it's a two-pronged opposition. Number one, it's based on religious belief grounds. Zionism does not comply with our religious belief. And the details of that, I'll go into it to a degree, but perhaps that is an area which is more appreciated among the Jewish people, or should be more appreciated among the Jewish people themselves. But then the other prong is on the question of religious values of humanitarianism, which are not upheld by Zionism. And this is an area, of course, which is acceptable, understandable by everyone in the world at large. Religious belief grounds, let's look at that for a moment. The Jewish religion, the Jewish way of life, is an age-old way of life. Our teaching is that it was revealed to us, as is written in the scriptures, at Sinai some 3,500 years ago, and it gives us a complete way of life, covering everything, every aspect of our life, from the cradle to the grave. But included in the various aspects of life which our Torah teaches us, there's also the question of where the Jewish people should live. And when the Jewish religious way of life was revealed at Sinai, it was, we were taught that the Jewish people would live and be allowed to live, that would be their place in the Holy Land, which is now known as Palestine. However, also incorporated within our teachings, this grant of being able to live in the Holy Land was subject to conditions, very stringent conditions. And these conditions were that we had to maintain very high standards, ethical, moral, religious standards. And we were warned, it's all incorporated within our teachings, that if those standards were not maintained to the correct degree, then the Jewish people would be, by divine decree, would be sent into exile. Sadly, the required degree of the ethical, moral, religious standard was not achieved to the correct degree. And as was foretold, the Jewish people were eventually sent into exile. And our teaching is that this is a divinely decreed exile. And history confirms that for the last 2,000 years or so, the Jewish people have been spread to the four corners of the world. But we are taught, what does this exile mean to us? Our teaching is that we have to live as loyal citizens in any country in which we find ourselves. We have to seek the good of our host country in which we live. And we are taught that we're not allowed to try and set up a regime of our own. This would be going against the wishes of the Almighty, which the Almighty is that we should be in exile. We are warned that if we try and go against this decree by our own efforts, then there would be very dire consequences. In fact, we are forsworn not to try and to oppose the divinely decreed decree. So that is the Jewish, Orthodox Jewish belief as has been handed down through the generations. Zionism, 100 years ago, came along with a new idea. It was an idea brought in by secular Jews, Jews that had gone away from their way of life. And they adopted a nationalistic idea, an idea of forming a state for the Jewish people. They did not accept that there was a divine decree of exile. They said that the Jewish people were in exile because of their own lack of energy or lack of will. And they completely denied the teaching that exile was a divine decree. So there you see, first of all, that from a religious belief point of view, why Orthodox Judaism completely is opposed, diametrically opposed to the concept of Zionism, which is the idea of taking the law into one's own hand and coming out of this exile. And that's on a specific level regarding coming out of exile and forming a state of our own. But it goes further than that, because Judaism as a way of life is full of godliness, ethics, morals, and Zionism is just the contrary. Zionism is atheism, lack of ethics, and lack of morals. So the two the two concepts are diametrically opposed to each other. And now let's look at the Orthodox opposition to Zionism on humanitarian grounds, which, as I said earlier, is a field which perhaps is more understandable by the world at large. Zionism, by definition, is a nationalistic, sectarian, and many would say a racist concept. The idea of forming a home for a specific group of people, for a specific ethnic group, and also in someone else's land, which is the situation as it is at the moment, in someone else's land, with complete disregard for Palestinian hopes, Palestinians being the indigenous population of Palestine, complete disregard, as is confirmed in the Zionist writings and speeches, the early founders of Zionism, complete disregard for Palestinian hopes for self-determination, for their livelihoods, for their homes, and sadly for their lives. And by so doing, Zionism committed and continues to commit a shocking contravention of humanitarian values, adopting the attitude that one must override by force, if necessary, any opposition. And this is in fact the picture of Zionism right up to the present day. Religious, Orthodox Jewish religious approach to humanitarian ideas preaches compassion and consideration for one's fellow man, sympathy with the suffering of one's fellow man, something completely different, completely opposite to the ideas espoused by Zionism. And so there you have the two main prongs as to why Zionism is opposed very, very strongly by Orthodox Judaism.